Hello and welcome to Quantum Harmony Home Summit Season 10. I'm Helena Reilly and I will be your host. I have a really special guest today who I'm so excited to interview. Masami. Welcome, Masami. Masami Covey is an extremely gifted medical intuitive, one of the top in the world. She is on the staff of the Shift Network, and she works with subtle body language and also the chemistry of the body and altering it. Without further ado, and there is more information in the link below. Welcome, 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 Masami. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well. Good to see you. I knew you were going to wear blue. I was looking for that color blue, but I decided to go with this blue. But
teal is really my favorite color. But so we have been diving into this narcissism, this topic as a trending topic because it is impacting all of our lives. And the discernment of this pattern in ourselves and in others can help us to balance and neutralize it. So how do you see this topic as trending? Why has it become such a focal point in the modern world?
My goodness, that's such a big topic. And I want to throw that same question back at you as well, maybe as I start talking. But it's an abundant phenomenon, that's for sure. The narcissism or narcissistic tendencies, traits, I think it's an emerging new archetypes, one of the archetypes. And in the myth world, obviously the narcissist or narcissus, right?
Narcissus.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Right. Had this kind of falling into the water, into his beauty and all that. That is playing out as if somebody warned us, hey, be careful. But hundreds of years ago, we've been warned. But we've been playing that out. And I think this is even though it's an old archetype, it's emerging as kind of a new face. It's putting on the new characteristics. And I have to say, I think we have to all remember that we all have degrees of narcissism in us, narcissistic tendencies. We have degrees of it. Because if we didn't have that, our ego wouldn't have the chance to manifest itself in this physical body at this time. So I look at it as it's not good or bad. It's not something that maybe you said, neutralize, possibly, but I think we need to look at it a degree, not say we don't want to become narcissistic or, he's narcissistic, she's narcissistic, and I live with one. Well, we all have the tendencies, and there are really interesting studies, and you know how much I love science, but it was a 2021 study. So it was a couple of years ago, study that came out of Ohio State, that they looked at 123,000 people, and they checked out and said, okay, what degree of narcissism are you at? Wow. And it really, basically what they said is that it's almost a form of surviving the world that we're living in right now. Narcissism is a way to survive it, maybe not perhaps thriving in it, but to survive the social media, the Zoom calls, the so much advertising who we are kind of thing out there. It's a form of how we navigate this very different terrain. And that led me to think that, I used to think of narcissism, do everything you can in your life not to become narcissistic. But instead of that, it's like, could this be our messiness and the yuck and muck of the world that we are going through in this terrain between 3D and 5D? Maybe there's some rough terrains. And this is why the narcissism, it's kind of this emerging new face of our modern world. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And last thing I want to say is that evolution, over the history of evolution that's been going on for billions of years, evolution has not always been, evolution doesn't equal elevation. Okay. Evolution doesn't always make us be better or good. It just means you're adapting. You're adapting to the terrain, adapting to the changes. So I think the narcissism that we're seeing so much of right now in the media and everywhere we turn on to see anything, we are kind of bombarded by it, is maybe it's our human way of navigating this stages that we're so not clear about yet.
Brilliantly said. Because one of the shifts that occurred during the pandemic is this, obsession with Zoom, and then you have to look at yourself every single day on a camera, on a high definition camera, and this definitely breeds a certain kind of awareness of your physical presence and your emotional presence, your vibrational presence. But do you feel that this is a sign that we're becoming excessively superficial in our assessment of ourselves and others?
Well, yeah. So, I think the answer is always in the degree of certain things. So I think it's spectrum always, and as you have worked with so many people, thousands of people over your career, that it's always kind of a degree of where they're at. Even think about depression. By the way, depression is one of the, I wouldn't say traits, but how it manifests. Like narcissism can actually manifest through depression and anxiety also. And highly sensitive, being hypersensitive can be a covert, vulnerable part of the narcissism as well, because narcissism divides into multiple categories. So there are dimensions within narcissism as well. The ones that are grandiose, like overt narcissist, to covert or hidden or vulnerable narcissist, and the ones that are like really dangerous narcissists, like Putin, for instance, right? Things like, so there are degrees, there are dimensions of it. So I think, is it increasing the amount that we're being exposed and we're seeing, even in our own selves? Is that increasing through COVID? And in COVID, us locking ourselves down and our desperation to want to connect with others might have pushed us towards that. So it's not, I don't want to go down the road of, is this something that we need to eliminate, or is this good, is this bad? But it gives us a chance to really do our own search and soul search and say, okay, where am I? And I think it's worth repeating the quote, like from a Krishnamurti, that says, I'm sure you know this quote that's very famous, is, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Right.
I love that. Yeah.
Right. Right. So is it narcissism, this really epidemic, really an epidemic of narcissistic behaviors? Is that our way of adapting, adjusting to profoundly sick world? Possibly.
Yes, where also, instead of you and I, for example, being in Colorado or somewhere doing this interview where we were actually together, there is something when it gets narrowed down in the third dimension to a screen that would breed more concern about what's superficial. And so one of the things that we were touching on is that how this might have infiltrated the self-development movement and some of the leaders, because so much is based on our physical presence, on what we look like, on what we're saying, on the energy we're emanating on a screen, instead of where, we got down and dirty, where, they can see we're real. They can feel and see you on a different level, where things get kind of messy and real. So how are you adapting yourself to feel connected in this society? Because here's what I feel is going underneath the surface. People are not really connecting in the same way, on the deep way. So there's this absence, and I'm looking for the words, I'm looking for the guidance. There's this absence of really real deep connection. and within ourselves, and an externalization of so many things human. And so how do you feel we as leaders in personal development, in movements that are teaching the new earth, how do you feel we've adapted? Have we gotten kind of off balance?
I think we all have. I just heard, I have heard from one of my good friends today, even before I got on the call, she said, I am taking some time off. I need a month or two off to reconnect. And it doesn't mean that I'm not doing anything, but I'm not doing anything outward. So can we postpone the interview that I was supposed to have with her? And I texted her back and I said, absolutely. I'm so happy you're doing that.
Proud of you.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, I had to take some time off last year because I hit the point of, I was just drowning in too muchness. It's just too much. I'm just too
muchness.
Yeah, it's too full. I am just too full. And I think we're all truly struggling from indigestion, acid reflux. And constipation. Think about it. That is showing up on the body too, but also on a energetic level, on the maybe spiritual level, we're just too full. And I think spirit has never experienced this level of bombardment and having to attend and learn and be more, and all the messages underlining all of us. And this doesn't skip spiritually oriented people, or people that meditate every day. It doesn't skip us over. Is that the underlying message has been for the last couple of years. And I don't think it was somebody decided, let's send this kind of a message, but you're not enough is the message. You're never enough. Therefore, you need to seek out more and be more, do more. And I think that has manifested itself coming back to the narcissism again. It's like, be more, put yourself out there. You are this or that. And, I hear people say, I want to become an influencer, or I want to be an expert in this. And it makes me kind of cringe whenever people use those words, but I think they're sincerely feeling that is the only way they can reach the place of, I'm enough. So the key is to get back to nature, really is get back to the stillness, which you and I have talked about a lot. And I'll add this to it. And then, I would love to hear your thoughts, is that when we look at narcissistic personality disorder, so it's called NPD. When you look at people with NPD that are being diagnosed with these disorders, let's say everything is a disorder, right? In the medical world,
Everything,
which really drives me nuts. But they've done
an acronym, a disorder acronym.
Yeah,
that we don't really understand, but
right. NPDs have reduced gray matter in their brain. So the areas of their brain, usually in the frontal cortex, but that area gets smaller. And it's the area that we express our empathy and sympathy and connection with others. So maybe coming back to some of your questions, it's like, what's going on? Like, out of desperation, I think we're wanting to connect with each other because we couldn't physically do that for couple of years, right? But when you look at the brain matter of the NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, they have shrunken or smaller gray matter of the brain. But what happened during COVID, so I'm going to tie back into what happened in the last 3 years to all of us, including ourselves, including myself, is that we were put into an extreme level of stress. The unknown. Humans don't do well with the unknown, right? That's why we are almost addicted to people that can predict the future for us. Anytime you say, I'm going to predict the future, I'm going to tell you what this year is going to be like, then there will be a flock of people that will sign up for that.
1 million people sign up.
Oh, yeah, we'll sign up for that. But the moment you say, I'm not interested in predictions, and they go, oh, I'm not going to tune into that. Because we are all desperate to have somebody tell us what's going on so that they don't get into the fear mode. But
yes, they want a sense of control, right?
Right. And none of us really had the control. We didn't exactly know what was going to happen. You didn't know you could get sick. You could lose your spouse. You could lose your family members. There's so much of this unknown. And what happens is that in that day in, day out of years and years of these kind of stress, that also shrinks our gray part of the brain. Gray matter shrinks. So it's interesting, isn't it, that during COVID, we started to see this like surge of narcissistic behaviors, including all across the globe as well. And we're not just talking Putin here. We're talking many presidents, many prime ministers, all across the globe. We're starting to see these extreme behaviors all across. But I can pull back and look at our own brain functions and say, wow, no wonder, because we all went through years of not knowing, years of fear, and our brains got really fried in that process. And that made that gray matter shrink. And that made us less empathic, or empathy. You know, you have less empathy for others. And that's a definition of narcissism, isn't it? Is that you don't care about anybody else. And so I think that is my thinking. Why are we seeing such surge towards narcissism? Is one, it's the environment that all of us are put into for the last 3 years. An inability to connect with human actual touch. And then I believe that another side of it is that we are traveling this terrain between the 3D model to 5D, between 4D there. That terrain is very messy. None of us really know. So it really emphasizes not knowing more. And I think that shrinks our brain even more in that gray matter area. So I hope that I'm making sense why we're seeing such a surge. Yeah.
And so would you say, and I think that's quite brilliant, actually, because you're tying together the environment, what happened, what we experienced, that we actually didn't have much control over. The way we experienced it and reacted to it, we had some sense of management or control, but in many ways the authorities were very fixed on controlling everyone's behavior with various techniques. So in the advent of the brain changing, we end up, so one of the aspects of this is that sensitives and empaths have more mirror neurons. So I think also what's happening is a shrinking, and that makes us more empathic and more sympathetic and more reflective of our environment. So where do you see the true balance occurring so that we can re-embrace our humanity in a healthy way? How do you see that evolving into what I would call healthy narcissism? Because there's very healthy narcissism that allows you to get up in the morning and do your work and take care of your body. And some people would call it self-love. And then there's unhealthy, not feeling the environment or the people around you and obsessively focused on somehow your own self, your own accomplished. Well, so that's not quite right. Just not able to respond to the environment in a way that is empathic is how I would define narcissism at the simplest level. So what's the bridge out of this pattern? And the second question is, how much is this impacting the teachers on the planet right now? Mm-hmm. Because, yes, so those are two huge major questions, because we're all being exposed to the same conditions. So the teachers and the student, the ones that are learning in self-development, everyone is being exposed to this humanly out of balance state, really. Mm. So what's the bridge to move out?
Well, oh man.
It's a big question. I know. That just came through.
Yeah, I know.
How do you get out of this pattern? How do
I
we heal?
Yeah, I think just putting that question out into the universe is really the start. And, as somebody that like you have worked with people for so long, and in psychology and psychiatry, we say, the most important thing is naming it to tame it, right?
Yes.
So naming it means you become aware. Naming it means you recognize that, okay, these last 3 years weren't just about our health getting compromised or we needed to lock down and couldn't be out there. It isn't just that. It really holistically, your whole being got impacted by this, whether you were severely sick or you weren't. I didn't get sick from COVID at all, but that does not mean that it didn't impact me somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And so first, I think naming what we went through in the last 3 years, very important.
Very key, because we've sort of forgotten and put it under the rug. I noticed myself that I'm very aware that Robert left Earth, but I don't seem to really calibrate what happened before, which was the pandemic. And I think many, I've forgotten about it. And yet, and I think it's really important that you point that out, because that's a trauma that was very traumatic. And trauma is what causes narcissism, is that in the early childhood, they're not receiving what they need, which is emotionally, which is traumatic, or in many cases, there's abuse. So the first step that you're pointing out is to integrate that experience in a compassionate way. We got messed up. Yeah. We got spun into a vortex that was not a positive, uplifting, creative vortex. We'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. So the damage done to us and the children, correct? So that so this is the first step to realize this is still with us.
Yes.
This is still in our field.
Yeah. And then I think it's important as teachers, you and I are out there supporting others publicly, to really humbled by the fact that we are, after all, still in this human body, and that we still operate at the 3D level as well. And, just the fact that I'm still wearing sweatpants every single day should tell you, I'm a very human being here on this earth. And
pretty sweater.
And a sweater on the top, so to recognize that just because you've done a lot of soul work, just because you're more tapped into maybe different frequencies than, let's say, maybe people that don't expose themselves to this kind of knowledge. Despite all that, it's very humbling for me to realize, wow, these past 3 years have really impacted me. And I have become exhausted. Towards the end of last year, I really needed to unplug. And even in the middle of last year, I had to unplug for almost a month just so that I can recalibrate myself. And I think that's what we're contending with, multiple layers of things. It's not just the terrain changing, the frequencies changing, the environment changing, but there's this physical recalibration that has to be happening. And that requires all of us to just pause once in a while, unplug once in a while, be with the nature once in a while, or regularly. Find a favorite tree and sit by it. Go see some kind of a water and then enjoy that serenity of that water. Or look at the stars at night, all those things. And I think more so as people who are intuitive or who can channel, or if you consider yourself to be hypersensitive person, or so HSPs or empaths, or whatever labels that you decide to kind of go with. I don't get too caught up in the labels, but if you do recognize that you're very sensitive, which I know I'm extremely sensitive, then what is required of me is more of a conscious unplugging, more than ever before. So you can't just say I'm sensitive and then just move along the day like you used to. We have to change the way we navigate, how we surf these waves, because it's different. It's a different kind of surfing. So I think the teachers themselves, if they don't evolve Okay. And they're not working on themselves, and their message is always the same. They're just giving the regurgitation of the same thing. Then that is not the type of teacher that you probably want to follow anymore. I used to have a professors like that, right, in college.
Oh, yeah, we all did.
That will print out the same material that the professor's been teaching since the 1960s. And it's the same material. Well, you may not want to sign up for that professor again the next semester. It's kind of like let's evolve it. Let's explore. And you want to work with teachers who are willing to be vulnerable and say, I don't understand this either. I'm still navigating in this as well. I'm right at the edge of these waves, but let's go together. Let's hold hands together. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on this? Like, if we can't do that, we're just going to adapt to the new, highly sick world.
And it sounds as though one of the adaptations is that shrinking frontal cortex. So that means less intelligence and more control.
Yeah.
And are you seeing that so Masami has a very extensive worldwide private practice. Are you seeing that in your clients where you actually feel less problem-solving ability, less sharpness? Do you see that in the children as well?
Yes, I do. Okay. And,
this is an important part of the summit.
Yeah. Well, one thing about COVID is that this is already a proven science, is that they've looked at people that have struggled with COVID, and let's say even long COVID, because long COVID is now, it's becoming kind of a pandemic on its own.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Because it's just widespread. People just can't get fully better. But what they've done is that they looked at the brain scans of people that are struggling with long COVID, and they're seeing that their brain isn't just shrinking, but their IQ is actually going down also. So it is actually impacting our brains. And is it actually the viruses that are doing that? Spike protein that is doing that? Possibly yes, and yes. But I also think it's like what I said, the 3 years of not knowing, living mostly in fear. And if even for someone like me that I didn't feel full on fear, even for me, there are moments. I mean, it wasn't like days after days, but the moments of like, are we going to be okay? That kind of I did question myself a couple of times. I would ask my husband, it's like, are we going to be okay? I mean, knowing that we're going to be fine, I still uttered those words. So that tells me that a lot of us, including myself, we all went through brain shifts, changes. And what happens is, as you know, with the limbic brain, so when we go through that kind of a fear and shifts in the unknown, too many months, too many years of unknown, creates our limbic part of the brain to be constantly sending alarms down your brainstem. I mean, alarm. And when the alarm is going off and the amygdalas are really firing up all the time, that's going to send a signal down through the vagus nerve to your gut, and your gut's going to get very irritated, and it's going to basically become kind of acidic in your small intestinal lining. You're going to have all kinds of pathogenic things that can take over. And so I'm seeing more and more people with like gut issues, parasites starting to show up, old viruses coming up, latent infections coming out. There's been surge of shingles and herpes are coming up, so, and then we're seeing a lot of these in younger generations. To answer your questions, what's going on with children? Well, I just read a study that showed that the herpes and shingles have gone up so much in younger generations that are 24 and younger. That is unheard of in the past, because shingles and things like that are generally 50s, 60s and up.
Yeah,
but that's changing. Our biology is literally, as we speak, it's changing. And But when our bodies are having to fight more than just COVID virus, but also your latent viruses, Epstein-Barr, Lyme disease, or maybe parasites or digestive issues, your body's allocating so much to try to heal this body that your brain goes into exhaustion, panic mode. It can go into depression, anxiety. So we're seeing the surge of that. And you can really point to a lot of different things. Is it because the kids didn't get to go to school for several years? Is it because we had to mask up so we couldn't see each other's facial expressions? Possibly. Do we not get, exposed to germs? And, when I read through the shingles issues, what I learned is that in the last 2 to 3 years, children did not get chicken pox because they weren't going to kids' birthday parties. And, usually my mother will send me to birthday parties so I can pick up some germs, and then
yes, right. We went to birthday parties to get sick. That was so it built our immunity. That was the truth.
Right. But we stopped doing that. Right. So there's a lot of, I'm not telling all this to scare anyone. It's just, I think it's the naming it to tame it. As long as we just kind of go like this, and, in Japan and China, we have the monkeys that can't hear and then don't speak and don't see, right? We call them the right. Those, we have monkeys that, kind of represent that idea. And if we continue to do that and not come out and really specifically talk about stuff like this, then I think we could never really start to turn that automobile, turn the ship around. We can't. So it's okay that we're honestly talking about this, we can't just say, okay, COVID is over. It's 2023 now, that let's just move on. I wish life works like that. But we have to remember that we are about 99% water. So the water weighs about 70% of our body weight, but your molecules are 99% water. And it's called the fourth phase of water.
Oh, yeah.
Fourth phase of water, as you know, is the EZ water, is the exclusion zone water. So it's the type of, the water that you talk about, right? It's the gel-like form water. We're made out of this gel-like form water. And why is that so important? It's because the gel-like form of the water stores all your memories, all your histories, all your ancestors' imprints, all your karmic seeds. Everything is imprinted and stored in your fourth phase of water, which is a gel-like form, which means that it's almost like you and I are these floating jellyfish, okay, in the ocean of water. We're all floating and moving through this universe, this earth, like memory that is stored in this gel-like form. So this past 3 years of what we've all been through collectively as well as individually are stored in this physical body. And it requires attending to that fourth phase of water in order to start healing it, naming it, so that you can become conscious of it and you can say, okay, I'm highly sensitive, I'm highly intuitive. Therefore, I need to attend to this fourth phase of water by maybe going hiking, maybe go find a stream, a lake, ocean, drink clean water, structured water. You know all about that because we are ultimately a liquid crystalline being. We're crystals of liquid. And I think that's when the science becomes as important as this beautiful spiritual world, and marry that, marble that, and say, we are this liquid being holding memories of our last 3 years and more. But we need to be gentle with one another and say, how can we begin to heal those imprints? And that requires some commitment. That requires honesty. That requires vulnerability. That also requires taking care of the gray matter of your brain through good nutrition, good mineral intake, good vitamins. And also, you know, before we started, I said that we need the good digestibility in your third chakra.
Good fire, good earthly fire. So yes, so I want to backtrack a little. That was really, really profound, the journey we just went on. And again, they're concerned about the children. So the 25% increase in anxiety and depression, and that's what's been measured. Anxiety and depression, also signs of well, when a child becomes, I want to find the right words for this, because when a child, and I don't want to label it, but when a child becomes anxious in a persistent way or depressed, this is about as unnatural as you can get. That child is not childlike anymore. If they're experiencing anxiety and depression and taking pharmaceuticals, they are almost taking on the stress from the world. And I want to address this because I feel no one is well, you know, there are clinicians, and of course, but that's very staged in a way, you know, that you would take your child to a clinician. What do you feel needs to shift in the nurturing of our children and families in our quantum harmony homes to shift this trajectory of anxiety and depression, which, by the way, are symptoms of narcissism? Is that usually narcissists have a higher degree of because they're not fully using their humanity, right? So they have a higher degree of anxiety and depression. And it might be indicating that the children, we're going to see much more severe narcissism in the children. But what would you say that you've observed is key for the children at this time, the families, to understand what's going on and how to embrace and help the children to raise their frequency and understand that this is a very unnatural time to adapt to, but also thrive in? So, and I ask you this both as the scientist and the intuitive. What message do we need to convey? You know, I often think, oh, thank God my son is older. I wouldn't know what, I would never have been able to keep him in the house because he was extremely active and extremely extroverted. So keeping him in the house, you know, I would have had 10 play groups or something every single day. But what would we tell? How do we shift this with parents and children? This is a big part of our vision, is to hold the children in a safe, loving place so they can develop naturally. And I'm not seeing that happening. The other day I was sitting in my car yesterday. I was talking to someone. Next to me, there was this cute little couple bringing their kid for a haircut. When I noticed, they were all just on their phones in the car waiting. And then they went into the haircut. Then they came out all happy, back on their phones. So the child had no reference, really. The child was really excited and the family seemed happy. But how do we shift this trajectory? And I say this as a way to open the awareness that it's very unlikely that kids are getting what they need if we're always staring at screens.
Well, I mean, you just gave a really, really important example right there. You know, as long as we're staring at the screen that is flickering all these horrible blue lights, first of all, and then you're holding to a microwave on your hand that's burning through your whole liquid being that you are, you know, that alone isn't going to help you at all. I think on a big picture, unplugging is very important. Unplugging from all kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
Just, I mean, literally the first thing that popped in my head is like, give every child 1 year break where they can go camping, they can go play with their friends, and they don't even, schools are very important, but to make the school more like based on nature, that is going to be helpful, and not to push these kids and say, you are supposed to be in ninth grade by now, even though when the COVID pandemic started, they were in sixth grade. It's like they're pushing them as you're chronologically, you're in ninth grade, so you better do this ninth grade thing. But they didn't get to do what it is to be a sixth grader. They didn't get to do the seventh grader stuff, eighth grader stuff. So to give everybody a little bit of break and look at the long term and say, we need to allow children to just be children. We have pushed children to become 3-year-olds becoming all of a sudden 13-year-old. I mean, that's the level of push that we did as a society. On the large, maybe more of a poetic side, because as you know, I love poetry and things like that. But John O'Donoghue is an Irish poet that I often still read, but he really emphasizes the idea of beauty, finding something beautiful. So exposing yourself to beauty that comes from sunsets. It could be from a beautiful, snowflakes coming down and looking at it microscopically and seeing the crystals in that, or learning to do something that is beautifying the world. And if you could filter your life through that you're walking in beauty, and what creates more beauty in your every step of your way, I think that can be an interesting thing that we can all contemplate and live based on. Is like, what I'm saying and what I'm doing, does this feed into the beauty of this world? Does it add to the beauty? And so expose yourself to your beauty, walk in beauty, taste beauty, listen to beauty. That can be an incredible thing we can do. And there was this interesting, again, I love reading scientific studies around this too, but it was after the major tsunami and the earthquakes in Japan, in northern Japan, and it was in 2011 in March. And so, it's been 12 years now, but so much of that pain that the entire world saw the tsunami go through. I mean, visually was an incredibly unbelievable scenes that we were seeing. The villages, homes getting washed by this tremendous, the force of the ocean. But what they did, one of the studies they did was they exposed people to beauty. So it could be beautiful music and the beautiful scenery, or they took them to walking through the woods and then talked about beauty. And then afterwards, what they did was they noticed that the speed in which they folded the paper cranes, because in Japan, we fold paper cranes, to show the symbolism of peace and love and care. And more people actually folded the paper cranes faster and more beautifully. And I know it's such an interesting study, but they did that to show our empathy and our sense of the mirror neurons that can work towards creating peaceful, loving society came after we were exposed to more beauty. So whatever that may be for you, might be about cooking a beautiful meal and recognizing, wow, this is beauty that comes into my body, or, go to art museum and see beauty. So I think if we can teach our children to say, this is what beauty is, and really guide them as adults, we need to guide them what beauty is, because a lot of children don't know what that means. When you ask, what do you think is beautiful? They don't know, because the last 3 years, they've been looking at things through the screen. They've never touched beauty. They've never tasted beauty. They never heard beauty. So they don't exactly know. So I think as adults, we can show them this is what it is to be in and walking in beauty. So I hope I just repeated the word beauty so many times, and it seems that can be a good start for kids, and also to recognize that it's going to take some time because we took some steps back.
Yeah.
Fully, we couldn't help it. This is what happened.
Yes, we did. We took, and some of it was steps forward because we were forced to go inside.
Mm-hmm.
But our connection, and it's interesting because beauty is high frequency, it's high vibration. And when something can be organized or revealed as beautiful, it can raise the frequency, right? And so what it feels to me, the message actually is that the children need more nurturing of their humanness.
Yeah.
Because there's so much on the technology right now, but they're little human beings, and losing touch with the beauty of being human is one of the leading precursors probably to narcissism, is that child wasn't properly, because many people emerge out of environments that are not nurturing, and they're not, they would be very low on the unhealthy narcissism because they figured something out growing up about the people around them. But I feel as though one of our big messages is for the children that they need more reflection from the parents, mm-hmm. and more nurturing, more actual mirroring of where the child is and where the child is moving. And once this occurs, and for some reason this is important for people to hear, once the child's healthy narcissistic needs are met, which is interesting that narcissist was looking at, his beauty, his handsomeness or whatever, his macho. Once these needs are met, and it doesn't take a lot with children. That's what's so interesting, that in order to wound a child, it takes a lot. But to heal or nurture a child, it can be a really small gesture or reflection or just a connection. And for some reason, we haven't talked that much about children, but I feel it's so important because it's never going to be received when you're staring at the screen. They're not going to feel you. And and then what you just kind of said about the beauty, made me think that it's the less emphasis on what's right here, which is just a reflection of you, right? That is, you're just looking at the self and self-interest. But to put that down and lift your gaze up and place more significance on something vaster, something that is other than the self. And I know that this morning I was even actually listening to a news program that they were talking about how we need more stories that will lift our gaze into what's outside of our immediate lives. We've become so pulled in, and that we are looking at our own microscopic level of day to day. And that became main day to day for most parents during the last 3 years, because many of them had to work, they had to feed the kids, they had to make sure the kids were doing their homework. I mean, there's so much inward, we got to do this at our home. And so they didn't have enough chance to look up and look at the Grand Canyon per se, or look up and see the Mount Everest, or look out and see the ocean. So it's creating a different physical gesture as well, because when you're looking at a screen, our physical body, you know me, I'm always going to bring it back to the body, but our physical structure itself starts to curve. So our head starts to go forward, our back starts to curl, because that's the only way to look at your phone. Nobody looks at the phone like this, right? So by putting that down and readjusting your spine, right, lifting that vertical axis a little bit more, opening that sternum, and look outside of just an immediate interest. And that's going to take some time, but that requires consciousness on the parents' part. We can't put all of this on the children's part. Like you said, we need parents that the children can mirror. Children need adults that they can mirror and learn from.
But it's difficult when the parents' gesture and their physiology is curled up and looking at their phones. The children are going to mimic exactly that same gesture. This is not a giving gesture. This is not a receiving gesture, as you know. This is about curling up. Yeah, this is about protecting. This is about freeze mode. So we are stuck in that fight or flight and now freeze. So I think physically, putting children in like a more of a PE classes, move their bodies, open their heart centers, do hip opening, do some yoga, cow and cat. But what we've done from a school system is that we removed PE classes. We don't teach art anymore. We don't teach singing anymore. But mainly those three subjects, what they do is that they change the shape of you from this C shape to more of an I that is connected between the heaven and earth. And that is the kind of education that needs to come back in,
Sort of like almost like a Rudolf Steiner, Waldorf, like expression and dance and movement. And it's so true what you're saying. And this is true. This is primitive brain. This is fight, flight, freeze. So the children are going to mirror the physiology. Now, we do harp on from the third trimester to the age of 7, they are recording every gesture, every thought, every emotion. They do not turn that recorder off until they turn 7. So just when you're sitting there looking at your phone all the time, that's what it also conveys, this message that the phone is more important than the child.
Yes. Yeah. So it's before we start, we tend to point our fingers at the younger generations and say they're more narcissistic than we are. And
I wonder why.
Yeah. That's perhaps the adults have curled up and then we've shown that kind of posture and they don't have any other role models to go by because we can't look to our presidents or we can't look to our even teachers in some cases. We can't look to our parents for our role models, meaning children can't because they're not necessarily operating in the way that is most helpful to the human growth. And for us to evolve, not just to adapt, but to evolve and elevate, we need different posture, different stance, right? But that's, one person at a time, really, Helena. I know you and I can't change the whole world, but one person that listens to this might say, ooh, I can do differently with my posture when I'm around my grandkids or when I'm with my children or even grown children, that they can begin to change how they operate. And that from studying people's behaviors, that what we're saying to them comes in and out the other ear for most things.
What we say, because it's often not consistent with what we're doing.
Exactly.
They're going to see what you're doing. They're going to see what you're thinking and feeling, not what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And, so I think the posture is very important. It's that deep connections, but it's the direct connection with the heaven and earth. Very important. And also coming back to the fact that we are 99% liquid crystal beings, that we are basically this liquid gel-like form that holds all these memories. Then only way to clear that and only way to heal that imprint is to start to nourish ourselves, hydrate ourselves with number one. It seems so silly, but to repeat this, but to drink clean water, filtered water that is clean, that has life in it. Structure your water, add some minerals back into it, add some potassium into it, add some sea salt to it, get some sunlight, because that liquid gel-like being that we are requires sunlight. But look how many kids are indoors now. They don't play on the trees. They don't climb anything. They're not playing and making mud cakes. So expose them to sunlight. That means maybe as a mother, as a father, we need to go outside with them and say, hey, let's get dirty. Hey, it's raining. Let's go out there and splash around the water together, like whatever that may be. That I think we need to tap into our own childlike self and give ourselves nutrients that's been missing in our foods, like really good magnesium, good zinc, and selenium. B vitamins. B vitamins are getting so lost right now. And one thing about the narcissistic brain is that they actually tend to have less of zinc and B6. Oh. So, it's that I don't think we can just point fingers at narcissistic traits and say, you're the problems. But maybe we need to look at our food industries. We need to look at waters. We need to talk to the municipal water people and say, stop putting chlorine and fluoride in our water systems, and, trying to speak up about that so that we can clear up this liquid crystals that we are.
Well said. And what Masami is saying is that it is by integrating the higher frequency information through these activities of play, joy, nourishment. Now, I didn't know that the brain would actually show less B6 or zinc. That's fascinating. What do you think that's connected to? That's incredible, actually.
Oh, I know. Isn't it amazing?
It's amazing. It's kind of triggering me a little, like, what does that mean, really? And not the other B vitamins, just B6.
Well, B6 in particular, sometimes actually there's like a riboflavin and thiamine as well. So B1, B2 comes in too. But B6 is a big one. The reason is that the B6 gets used up by a lot of functions of our body. So let's say like if you're making other neurotransmitters, so you need dopamine, you need serotonin, or even production of hormones like melatonin. They all require B6, and also steroid hormones like sex hormones, so progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. They also require B6 and zinc. So they are used up by so many functions of your body, and your adrenals require a ton of B vitamins to function and to keep your cortisol at the level that you're not freaking out level. But as you know, stress comes with cortisol. I mean, that is just hand in hand. When you have stress, your cortisol level goes up. Well, that whole function requires a lot of B6. So your adrenals are using up your B6, and they become like a little hoarding machines. Adrenals are the little hoarders of the B6s and other nutrients as well, like zinc too. But so that gets sucked out. Then basically the adrenals say, we need this. We're not giving it to you. So liver, you do your own things without B6 and zinc. And zinc is also extremely important for the adrenals. And zinc is used for neurotransmitter productions, but also hormones. But also zinc is important for digesting. So digesting anything, information, foods, karmic stuff, your ancestral stuff, zinc is required. But zinc is also important for immune system. And well, guess what we've been doing for the last 3 years? We've been trying to work on make sure that your immune system is adequate enough. So your zinc is getting used up. But without zinc, children really have a hard time growing. Zinc is a major nutrient for children to grow and be strong in their muscles, their bones, their eyesight. I mean, zinc is used in everywhere you can find. But, unfortunately, there's the hardship of what we've been going through as physical body for the last 3 years, but also the food sources are depleted of B vitamins, zinc, and other like magnesium and things like that as well. So we are living in like a perfect storm with foods not having enough nutrients and the stress level so high that your body is allocating all these necessary vitamins and minerals into trying to survive. So many of us are not thriving. And narcissistic tendencies, I think, is a symbolism of us just trying to survive.
And also putting up a shield in the world. So it's interesting because high adrenaline people are often in leadership positions. Right? They are in the positions of running a company or running a country. And so the amygdala is actually getting very activated because they're high adrenaline and depleting the actual resources of the body. So what about heavy metals? Do you see that in the adults and the children, that the heavy metals are interfering with the absorption of nutrients such as zinc, absorption of nutrients from food, if there is any nutrients left in the food? I'm not sure. But I think this is important, because when we have a lot of families in the audience, and when you look at your child, instead of, seeing it as a problem, you want to see the child as being slightly thrown off by the time that we're in, and then look at it as, how can I nurture them to find their place in this world, their feeling heart center, their joy. I say this because I've been noticing a lot of the parents are very concerned. They understand that they're in a strange vacuum energy.
Yeah. So, I mean, heavy metals are nuts.
In the bodies, right? Because
yes, it's everywhere. We're basically swimming in the air that is filled with heavy metals. We're drinking waters with
Monsanto, right?
Yeah. I mean, the food sources, everything, glyphosate, you name it, right? And when I started learning about the hair tissue mineral analysis, and now I do the blood test and things like that, there's no way that anybody can avoid heavy metals. We all have heavy metals. So instead of looking at heavy metals as something that happens to other people, number one, name it to tame it. First of all, you've really got to understand that we all have heavy metals. That means I don't think we could live on this earth anymore, let's say, by eating just conventionally grown foods and eating dairy and meats that are conventionally produced. You just can't, because they are heavily injected with all kinds of hormones and heavy metals, and not to mention vaccines tend to have heavy metals in them too as a preservatives. So, we can go down the rabbit hole with this also, but I think number one, to recognize that we all have heavy metal issues, and the body requires things like B6 and zinc to chelate some of these out of our bodies and to release them out of our bodies. We use up a lot of these minerals and vitamins. So please, maybe you are one of those people that have always decided that I'm going to take care of myself by just eating better, and then I can get my nutrients that I need just by eating. I don't think that is the world that we live in anymore. And as sad as it is, it's better to recognize that now and say, I do need to take some supplements. And the children are coming into this world already depleted because the generations prior to that child has already been depleted. So, we can't miraculously have babies and children that have all the minerals and vitamins that they require to grow. No, they don't. They come in with average of 250 different kinds of chemicals in their bloodstreams. And they come with multiple layers of heavy metals, and they're already depleted in nutrients. So that's just, I think it's okay to see that as a fact instead of something to fear, and just say, yep, that's the fact. Therefore, I need to start taking care of my children immediately. And so I actually have done multiple work with newborns, and then to support the pregnancy as well with the mothers prior to, because I believe in supporting mothers before they even decide to get pregnant.
Yes.
And then during the pregnancy as well. But
I'm going to send you my daughter-in-law. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. I'm going to send you. Yes.
Right. And then so I do often recommend like a liquid B vitamins for little babies. Mix it with your, milk or little applesauce if they're starting to eat more solids. Or I also do a lot of like a liquid zinc, because liquid zinc is really easy to ingest and the babies don't have any issues ingesting that. So doing kind of like diluted liquid zinc form and put it in a little droppers and give it to them in their mouth. And generally when you have enough zinc, you will respond really, like you'll be grossed out by the liquid zinc. And you put a little bit on the baby, and then you can watch the baby's facial expressions. And then the baby is starting to kind of make that face like, oh, this is gross. Then you know the baby has plenty of zinc. But if the baby doesn't even notice it, just drinking it like it's water, then you know that child is having major zinc deficiencies. And I've shared this story with some other interviews as well, but I had this really cool case where a 3-year-old, he was getting kicked out of every preschool that you can imagine. And so by the time she found me and contacted me, she was crying on the phone and she said, my child has been kicked out of 5 preschools. And they've told me this child has anger issues, and he's now going to a psychiatrist where he's doing anger management. And I said, how old is this kid? And she said, 3 years old. And so I said, let's do a hair tissue on him. And I already knew that he's going to need zinc and he's going to need to change his diet. But what I did was I looked at his hair tissue. And when he and his sister came and his mother came to meet with me on this hair tissue, I said, just hold on, let me get something. So I got the liquid zinc out, little sea salt in a little jar, and I cut up a little cubes of butter. So organic Kerrygold butter. And I brought it up, and then I had this. So the sister and the brother, so the little boy, I had them melt the butter in your mouth and take a little sea salt and then enjoy the melting of the butter. And I gave both of them this little liquid zinc. And this child, this boy, was basically out of control, that he couldn't sit still even for a minute. He was literally destroying our house when he came to I have an office space that he came. He was starting to rip the artwork from the walls. I mean, he was doing crazy things that I said, I'm not seeing this kid inside my house. We're going to go outside and we're going to do this session outside. But then this boy started to go climb the tree, started to break the branches. I mean, he was trying to destroy my yard. But by the time I gave the brother and the sister the butter, sea salt, and the liquid zinc, I'm not kidding, Helena, this child within about 5 minutes relaxed so much. He came over to me. He's never met me before. Put his arms around me and started rocking on my lap. And he just wanted to be rocked by me, whom he's never met before. I'm giving this example that it's so powerful is that when the body and the brain gets the right nutrients at the right time, that body will immediately shift. There's a caveat to this. He is 3 years old. So if you're 30 years old, you're 60 years old, if you're 70 years old, it will probably take a little bit longer than just 5 minutes.
Yes. Okay. Children respond fast.
Yeah. So I want to give mothers and fathers hope that if you can really detect that child's nutrient deficiencies through either hair test or somebody like intuitive like me that can kind of look into that, or blood tests, stool tests, kind of find ways that you can detect what is missing in this child. But I will tell you, you don't even need to do those tests. The fact is, almost all children these days are lacking in zinc and B6 and good amount of sea salt and really good fresh water that is going to nourish you. That's the key. If it can't nourish the liquid crystal being that you are, then that's a poison water. A lot of people are drinking poisonous water in the name of drinking water. As you know, you are big on drinking beautiful water, structured water. So those are the things, if you could start to do liquid zinc, B vitamins, and it could be a liquid B vitamins. It could be such simple thing as just dropping them into the child's morning water, or breakfast, and then doing a little sea salt and giving the child enough water. That's going to calm the brain. and you'll see the difference in that child, sometimes within 5 minutes. Yeah.
Amazing, actually. And it's so, the response is so quick that it's incredible. Do you feel that also the iodine for children, liquid, nascent iodine is really important for the thyroid and for, yeah, tell us about that. Why is that important? Of course, there's a very good brand. I don't know if you have one.
Yeah, I mean, I do use, if you're interested in learning more about iodine, I would definitely get a really simple to read book. It's called Why We Need Iodine and Why We Can't Live Without It by Dr. Bernstein.
Okay.
And he is the David Brownstein. He is the main guy for the iodine that you definitely want to look into. But iodine is used by every cell in your body. Every single cell of who you are uses iodine. So it's kind of fun, right? To think that we might be the school of fish that is swimming through this universe, okay, as collective, but also individually, we are this different expressions of fish. I just kind of want you to imagine that, right? Yes. Because we're the liquid being, right? So we're not just the jellyfish. Maybe we're just the school of jellyfish or school of fish that's swimming through. And we have our own music to play. We have our own colors to express. We have our own beauty to express. But we're also moving through this universe as a school of fish. Okay, so let's put that in your mind. Then you can understand why iodine is so important, because the iodine sources come from ocean, right? The best source of iodine comes from eating things like seaweeds, sea vegetables. That's where we get the iodine from. But what happened was that and I'll give you a little bit of a history behind the iodine too, is that in the 1930s and 40s, and then into about 50s, the United States started to see this like skyrocketing number of people started to have goiters. So goiters are when you can look at somebody's throat area and they have like a band or like a bump in the throat, right? So the iodine is like it's becoming enlarged iodine, the thyroid, right? So what the government did was they asked some scientists to study this and why is this happening? Why are we having so many goiters? Then what they found is that when they started to add the iodine back into their diet, then the goiters just kind of disappeared. So that the US government decided to add iodine to cereal, like cornflakes, breads, just the kind of a basic American diet stuff. They started to add iodine to it. But then fast forward, what happened was this one scientist decided to do some study on iodine and found that maybe out of thousands of people he studied, there were like 2 people with hyperthyroid issues that had little issues with the iodine. By taking iodine, it didn't help these like 2 or 3 people. So he published that studies and said iodine is dangerous.
Oh.
Okay, so I want
hypothyroid. Yeah. So
I want to put that into perspectives here. Okay, so what happened was in 1984-85, the U.S. government decided to remove iodine completely from the food sources. Okay, so they stopped adding to it. Mm-hmm. Then what ended up happening? Everybody can look this up. The hypothyroidism started to creep up, and we have the epidemic of hypothyroid issues. Everybody's having thyroid issues. Okay. Is iodine important? Yes. And when you live in a world like Japan, where we eat a lot of seaweeds, we eat in general about 600 times more iodine than the people in the United States. Okay. 600 times more iodine. And we don't have the epidemic of hypothyroid or thyroid autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's. We don't have those issues. Wow. So, is iodine very important? Absolutely. Are we having iodine depletions? Absolutely, because we don't add iodine-rich foods back into our diets, right? So starting with the iodine-rich salt, but also maybe sea vegetables, adding iodine liquid back into your drinks. I know David Avocado Wolf, he has probably iodine he recommends as well.
Dr. Group has something called Detoxidine, and it's the purest. I just got some today, and you can get it on Amazon. I've noticed a big shift. I'd forgotten to keep taking it. Do you feel how do you feel iodine depletion affects brain function?
Well, so iodine, I'm just going to kind of tune into the intuitive side of it. Of course, it's going to impact the brain, right? Because iodine impacts every cell in your body. Every cell, right?
So it's going to affect neuroplasticity.
Absolutely. Oh, it'll impact every function. I mean, when you're depleted of iodine, it isn't just about thyroid, but it dials you down. So what I want you to imagine is that we are all depleted. Yeah, we're all depleted of a lot of different nutrients. That is a given world that we live in. That's why you need to supplement your depleted nutrients with supplements, right? You have to supplement that. That's why it's called the supplements, right? Supplements are, to me, necessary because it supplements my life. Right. So when you're depleted with the iodine, obviously it's going to dial you down as a human light. Right. So when I go to places like Costco, okay, I see dialed down human beings. We're all walking around as if those zombie movies have become real. Like we're just walking around like zombies, pushing the carts, and we all have like depleted, downgraded, dialed down as who we are. So the vibrancy isn't there anymore. We're just literally surviving, taking one step at a time.
Wow.
And so is it just the iodine? No, because iodine works with, guess what? Zinc, right? To make your thyroid very healthy. Iodine works with selenium to make your thyroid healthy. But the iodine also work in your brain with different nutrients to make your neurotransmitters work. So it's like on one hand, we're pushing the meditation to do neuroplasticity, do this, do that. You can listen to this program or you can do this meditation. You can do this kind of affirmations. But if you're physically depleted, I find that to be how we're supposed to bridge that to here. We're going to be exhausted. So we need to make sure that the body is well fed and nourished and our minerals and vitamins are fully here so that we can fully engage in these practices as well. And, I've been to many 10-day retreats or meditation retreats, and every time I've attended those, I will always sit next to somebody that is trying to do a meditation, but they're falling asleep or getting sick. I went to this meditation retreat, 10-day meditation retreat just before COVID. And 80% of the people got sick by the time it was the 5th day into it. And they all dropped out. Like they all stayed in their own rooms. They didn't even participate in this thing that they probably flew in to do. They paid to do it, and 80% gone. And so I thought, you can come into these kind of things with this, I'm going to do this meditation. There's this positive affirmations. I'm going to do this. But if you are lacking in basic building blocks, you cannot build your house.
That's very true. Well said. And also with the new frequencies and the way they're being downloaded, the body has to be both flexible and able to handle this. The new earth. The new earth has different frequencies. One of the speakers informed me yesterday that that it's been measured, and this is real NASA science, that the earth spun faster than it has ever been recorded to spin over the last month. And this is why people are feeling like, whoa, this must be a new roller coaster ride that we're on. And so, yes, really incredible. And I love the way you're enlightening us about if your foundation is not strong, we actually cannot take the steps into our evolution. So even you go to India to meditate with the great master and you're sick the whole time. I've seen that over and over again. Now, the other thing we always mention is the significance of vitamin D, because I also do feel that the people that died from COVID were just highly depleted. But now there's a new wave of this. It's a coughing thing. I forget what it's got an acronym to it. And the hospitals, I actually saw a doctor for the first time in 30 years. And she said that the hospitals are so full right now. She said the emergency room, like if you have anything that's even somewhat subtle, or they'll just send you home because if you're not like falling apart in a very obvious way. So we want people to be aware. And I feel as though, Masami, if I want to interject a little, if you feel that you need to work on your physical health and the physical, emotional, mental health and well-being of your children, this is a good woman to reach out to, because she's going to go deeply into the real cause of not the surface, like, okay, we'll give you an antibiotic for that. But meanwhile, the child doesn't have B vitamins, or in many cases, they're prescribing, medicines for ADD when B vitamins and zinc and D and very simple things would shift that child. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, it's humbling to hold to truths. What's true is that we are this 3D body.
Yeah.
And what's true. Yeah. And what's true is that it's shifting. Whatever it is, it's shifting. We know that. But we also have 1 foot in 5D and beyond. It isn't going to just end at 5D. I mean, our bodies are being exposed to very different frequencies, very different speed in which that things are unfolding and changing. And what's humbling about it, for me anyway, every day, is that I still come back to this physiology. I still come back to, what are we eating? How are we digesting? Are you sleeping? Are you drinking clean water? Are you taking care of yourself? And then taking care of yourself includes, are you walking in beauty? Are you exposing yourself to beauty? And are you thinking through, and are you filtering your life through, what can I do to be the expression of beauty? And those things are very humbling, because I think what mistakes we've made in the spiritual communities, and this is why I choose to speak in the spiritual community over and over and over, is because we can't just talk about out of this world, out of this earth matter constantly and say that there are these frequencies, there are these intuitive voices, and these are the guides and angels, and those are important. Okay. Yeah. And you have to feed your body with these things that we're talking about. So it's like we've got to stop doing this either or, and bring the and, both and. So we are this body, and we are experiencing something so much greater than this body.
Yes, we're moving into higher dimensional consciousness, but it is very true that, especially like in the ascension movement, and that there can be a tendency to deny or not fully address the needs of the third dimension physical, and it's a lesson we all have to learn. Would you say that the grounding, and it's going to impact so many generations. If we learn this now, we impact at least 7 generations pre and post, possibly many, many, many more. And if we don't learn it now, we impact 7 generations pre and post, possibly more. So let's learn it now. It's pretty simple stuff, really. It's nothing. It's really nothing complicated. But instead of just always going, the route of the diagnosis and the drug, consider what else might be missing in the child. So in conclusion, what would you share as the most important because what I've realized is we've just also shown some of these tendencies are also why we're going to have this epidemic of Alzheimer's that they're predicting, is that if people are depleted in what Masami just outlined, they'll definitely lose brain function as they age. And also, narcissism is supported by poor nutrition on all levels, poor nourishment. So whether it's physical nourishment, emotional, mental, it's support, it's part of it. So in conclusion, and Masami will have a beautiful gift, but I also really want to say that if you have children that are suffering, if you're suffering and you know you need some help, please reach out. That's why we do the summits, is to make you aware that there are more resources. So in conclusion, what is your that was mine.
I mean, I think you just summarized it for me. And I think we need to stretch ourselves a little bit more. That's what we're being asked to do right now. When I used to work with people, used to work with people in terms of like 101, working on their physiology. And I used to do a lot of hands-on work, which I don't do anymore. But I emphasize this concept of range of motion. So ROM, range of motion. So range of motion is used a lot in like physical therapy, or even stretching, or even in yoga world, or, Pilates, whatever. But it's to have the range of motion to hold so many more truths. So it isn't just about, so I think we can all be careful a little bit and take a look at yourself, pull yourself out and become the witness of when you become too stuck in isms. So isms create no range of motions. That is the extremities. That's when people get pulled apart into this party, this tribe. I only believe this way. You become very narrow. And that's what ended up happening during COVID. Whether you are, for vaccine, or you were anti, or you believed in COVID, or you didn't believe in COVID, or if you're red or you're blue, or, whatever that may be, it really made us go into the isms. So if you tend to go into, I only eat this way because I believe in blah, blah-ism. So it could be veganism, could be vegetarianism, it could be paleoism, you name it.
Keto-ism, yes.
Keto-ism, yeah, it's all isms.
Yes,
And when you do the extreme work, your body will sooner or later, and actually sooner these days, because things are spinning faster. So that's how the body will show for you, is that you don't need to do keto-ism for 3 years in order for you to hear your body. It'll let you know within 3 days or 3 weeks that isn't working for you anymore. It's that fast. So listen to that body. Body does never do well with isms. So to me, the most important thing about how to take care of this liquid crystal being is to live by the circa. So what circa means is the circadian rhythm, circa annual, circa tides, circa lunar, so circa seasonal, basically seasonality of who you are. So eat differently in the spring, eat differently in the summer, eat differently from morning to evening, eat differently through Monday through Friday. So it's never a one kind of thing. Change your workouts, change out the tree that you go visit. Maybe you have your favorite, but maybe find another one. If you're always going to the tree, maybe go find a pond. If you always are attracted to water, go try the mountains. Find the range of motion that gives you this potential to take in so much more that is happening all around you and all around within us. It's a fascinating time to be alive. I'm so grateful that I'm alive right now. I'm so glad my soul and my spirit decided to come in at this time in this form, because I get to experience such a wide variety, the range of colors and shapes. And one last thing is that your liquid crystal being has 70, so 70, okay, octaves. that expresses itself. To put that into perspective, your piano keys, normal piano, has about 7.25 octaves. Okay. But your body has 70 octaves that can express itself.
Wow. That's
So how many of that are we really expressing? I think most of us, maybe 1 octave.
maybe
right?
1 or 2. Yeah, we see it. We see it in the voice, actually. We analyze only five octaves, but actually that's more than, that's true. We see most of the energies in 1 octave, sometimes 2 octaves. Yeah.
Right. So range of motion. That is my last word. Range of motion.
Range of motion and frequency. I want to thank you for being with us today and sharing a journey of healing. And for those of you that are resonating and need this information, please do reach out to Masami. The information is contained in the link below. I want to thank you for your divinity in being with us today. Masami, on this full moon in Cancer, by the way.